The Triathlon Show 279. Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to another episode of That Triathlon Show, the podcast presented by scientifictriathlon.com. I'm your host Michael, and on today's episode I interview Helle Frederiksen. Helle is a coach and former professional athlete. Back in her racing days, Helle competed in the London 2012 Olympics. She is the ITU long distance world champion from 2018, and she holds the fastest ever time in women's half distance racing with a 3:55.50 from Challenge Bahrain. In this interview, we discuss Helle's training and coaching philosophies, racing execution advice and the importance of racing, and much, much more. But before we get into the interview, big thanks to our sponsors. First, we have Precision Hydration that you can find on precisionhydration.com. Precision Hydration's electrolyte products are trusted by athletes like Sarah Crowley, Emma Pallant, and the Team Sunweb World Tour cycling team. You can order electrolytes of different strengths to match how you sweat, because sweat sodium concentration levels vary from as little as 200 milligrams of sodium per liter of sweat to as much as 2,000 milligrams per liter of sweat. And when you combine these differences in sodium concentration with differences in actual sweat rates, so somebody at a certain intensity might sweat 1 liter per hour, but another person might sweat 2 liters per hour or even more, then the potential variance in the total net sodium losses for one athlete versus another can be really, really significant, and especially over the course of longer events like a middle or full distance triathlon. Go and take a free online sweat test on precisionhydration.com to get a personalized hydration strategy and get advice for what strength or electrolyte would suit you. And you can get 15% off your order with the promo code ThatTriathlonShow15. And thank you to Roka that you can find on roka.com. Roka have created products like the Maverick wetsuit lineup, the Viper swimskins, and the Gen 2 Elite Aero tri-suits to make you as fast as you can possibly be on race day. These types of products are designed from the ground up with taking every single measure that can be taken to make the products faster in the water or faster in the air, more aerodynamic when you're on the bike in the tri-suit and so on. Basically, the end goal of these are performance. And as a user of Roka's products, I can say personally that they really nail it with all of those products. I have them all and love them all. But in the last few years, Roka have also entered the market of eyewear, and in particular prescription glasses and sunglasses. And they are taking a bold new approach with really, really cool designs, first of all, but also their features and innovations like the blue light blocking coding options, the home try-on options and customization options, the materials used that are ultra lightweight, the Geeko anti-slip technology, the fact that they have no pressure points in their glasses, and much, much more make these glasses just really, really cool and a joy to wear and use, whether we're talking sunglasses or prescription glasses or prescription sunglasses. You can get 20% off your order with the promo code that you can get on roka.com/TTS, and that applies to all of their triathlon products or swimming or endurance sports products, as well as those eyewear products. Now, without any further ado, let's get into the interview with Helle Frederiksen. Today's guest on That Triathlon Show is Helle Frederiksen. Helle, welcome. How are you doing?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Why don't you start by just giving the audience a bit of an introduction to yourself, who you are, and your background in the sport of triathlon and so on.
Yep. Well, my name is Helle Frederiksen. I'm from Denmark. I'm a former professional triathlete. I retired 1.5 years ago now, after being in the sport for about 15 years, more or less, and about 11 years as a professional. I'm an Olympian from London 2012, I am an ITU long distance world champion. And then I have 10 70.3 Ironman 70.3 victories, and I still am the holder of the fastest time on a half distance for a female. I did that in Bahrain in 2014, and it's still standing. So that's like my sporting background. And before triathlon, I was I swam as a kid. And was on the national team in swimming up through my teenage years before having a good break before I actually got into triathlon.
And you've also done university studies. I think you have a master's in nutrition. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I have a bachelor in sports science and health, and then a master in human nutrition. So I got that done actually before I turned pro. I was racing elite while I did my master, but I decided when I finished my thesis that now I'm going to try and give it my all and try and turn every stone so that I will not regret that I didn't give it a chance.
Yeah, that makes sense. And your all-time best 70.3 result in Bahrain, what was the time that you set there?
3 hours and 55 minutes and 50 seconds.
All right. And do you want to break down, do you remember what were the splits that you did, the swim, bike, and run splits?
Oh, yeah. I think the swim was like 22 minutes, something like that, 22 or 23. The bike was 2:12, I want to say, 2 hours and 12. And the run was 1:17 flat.
All right. And maybe we start there because it's something that I wanted to ask when you were racing at the peak of your fitness and achieving your best results. What did your training look like? So maybe that's a good example. What sort of training led to that performance?
Well, I would say that there's nothing really special. Like there's not really a secret recipe of how you achieve success in triathlon. It's a lot of accumulated work over years. It's about staying consistent and doing the right things at the right time. And it sounds pretty simple, but it's absolutely not. Making the right decisions at the right time. Often, when you are feeling a little nickel or you're a little tired, do I go through with the session, or do I pull back and do a little few intervals, or do I even not go out for a run or ride that day? So those tiny decisions you have to make all the time. I think those are the one that matters in the long run. And often it's about not going overboard and always keeping a little bit in the tank. Always having that ability to, if you needed to do one more, you can. One more interval, you can. And then also remember that no sessions are more important than the other one. So you need to back it up the day after. So it's that whole mindset of staying consistent. If you want to be more specific of what did I train, well, I would say probably hour-wise, it was something like 26 to 20 hours a week, 26 hours to 28 hours a week. And about 2 key sessions per discipline, more or less, per week.
Yeah, that's a perfect answer. I think with starting with the most important things and then narrowing down into what things like the volume look like and the key sessions.
Yeah,
you're right. It's the accumulation of volume, and sometimes you don't even know that you have a peak performance in you, and then it just happens.
Exactly. It actually did come as a surprise that I raced that well. I would have thought that it would come maybe half a year later, because I was still fairly new on the distance. It was only my second year doing 70.3 races. And at that point, I still haven't really dialed the nutrition probably either. So all the races before the race in Bahrain, I always kind of felt flat around 15K on the run, where I was just losing, I just had no more energy in the end. So it was actually the first race where I got nutrition right as well. So there are only, a great handful of races throughout your career where you just absolutely nailing it, and you are on cloud 7, and everything is just going, so well. Like you are racing so effortless, but still it's so hard. It's just comfortable to be in this kind of cloud 7. If you know what I mean, it's just amazing when you get there, but you don't get many of those in your lifetime.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean there. I kind of sense it as in some races you can push yourself to a level that you normally can't, and you can feel all of the pain, but you can kind of embrace it in a different way than you normally can, and you can bear it for a long period of time when you have those days, and that's what makes all the difference. If you can really push yourself so much harder than you normally can, and you can do that for a long time. It's
magical when you get there, right? And I mean, sometimes you feel a similar feeling in training, but you have so many training days and so many sessions out there, but you don't have that many races to get it right. Yeah, you maybe, I probably raced like 120 triathlons throughout my career, but still, I have no idea how many hours I've trained in total. So, I mean, getting it right on a certain day, that's a race day that you have not decided that day, it's magical when it happens.
Yeah. So these days you're mainly working as a coach, is that correct?
Yeah. I still stay active. I mean, I did not stop triathlon because I didn't love it anymore. It was just time to do something else, and I was ready to kind of start to give back to the sport and help people achieve their dreams. So I train a bit every day myself, and then I coach some athletes.
And I think you already have mentioned some of the really important things there with the accumulation of training over years and always leaving a little bit in the tank and so on. But are there any other key principles that you, as a coach, try to advise your athletes and teach them and instill in them that you think are important to understand as an athlete? Yeah,
so I think it's very, very important for me, the whole person approach. So that I want to get to know my athlete. I want to know their situation. How do their working situation, their family situation, how are their everyday life looking, so that I can plan according to their restrictions. I think that's essential for the right sort of coaching, because anybody can make a plan, but it's the coaching aspect of it that is the art, if you want to say it like that. So I think it's about balancing the stressors, other stressors in life, so that if we're talking about an age group or an amateur, where triathlon is the hobby, right? So you don't want this hobby to take all your the left energy you have in you, when you also have to spend energy on family and work. You want it to give you energy. You want to bring you happiness, and looking at that whole person approach, I think that there you can certainly make everything get up to a higher level, and you can see the crossovers from what the sport is giving you, and then see the crossovers to your work life as well. Suddenly you might be able to start to perform better at work, and you are being more structured there. You're starting to achieve some result there that you have maybe you never ever want to dream about. So when you can balance this whole thing, then it's getting interesting. So whole person approach is something that I'm very, very keen on. Then I also I'm a very field-based coach. So I use a lot of graded perceived effort. I want to teach my athletes to listen to their body. How does this feel for you? Like I'm explaining, I would like it to feel like this sort of session that you're going out to do, and then I'm trying to observe and monitor the feedback that they come with. And then after that, it's like then I'm seeing, okay, what was the watts and the heart rate according to that feel, and then get the evaluation that way. And then really teach my athletes to what are your zones and when to push and how to push. and how to, like, I would say professionals are masters at knowing our body and knowing how this is supposed to feel. Like, we're so familiar with going out there and training hard and training easy, but also going out where it's so uncomfortable, that familiar feeling and that knowing of how far you can go, we can always bring that into racing. And then when you race, you get better at that intuition of, okay, I know I can go harder because I've been there before. I know myself. And to get to know yourself as an athlete is just an incredible tool that will make you such a strong athlete in races as well.
And even in the day-to-day training, especially for amateurs with work and family, the variability from day to day can be quite a lot bigger, I think, compared to professionals, because there is so many more unknowns with like how a stressful day at work or stressful family obligations might affect you. So maybe on a day when you are supposed to do a certain hard workout, and whatever hard is might feel a lot harder than it should, than being able to use that rating of perceived exertion to pace yourself, and based on all the other things that have been going on is an important skill.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that you don't absolutely bury yourself.
Absolutely, that's exactly how it is. So I think it's great that, you know, you bring your devices out there, that you have you can measure the watts and you can measure whatever, if you're measuring heart rate and speed and all these things. But it's so important that that's a guide and you do not get dictated by it out there, because you know that day where you're supposed to push, I'm just going to say something, 250 watts, and they're just not there that day. You know, you cannot find those watts in your legs, and you're trying so hard to get there, and you are going overboard and you're pulling yourself apart to achieve those 250 watts that was on the program. But if you started to listen to yourself, okay, is this a strong effort today? And you might only be hitting 230, right? But you're still getting that physiological stimuli without going overboard, so that the next day you might have to pull back, or you will get ill in a few days or something like that. So do not be a slave to your devices. I would say, like, measure it and use them and evaluate afterwards when you go home, and then write your subjective feedback, and then upload your devices. And then we would learn as we go on with, okay, what does steady mean in terms of watts and paces and heart rate for you? But also, as you say, like, for instance, like heart rate, it's affected by so many things, right? And yeah, as you said, with work stresses, or if you have slept enough, but it's also with like humidity and heat and cold, and there's so much hydration level. There's so many things that affects your heart rate that it's just, if you're only using that, you will often get it wrong.
Do you ever get pushback, for example, when a new athlete starts with you, and maybe they're used to training in a way that's very much driven by a certain pace target or power target or heart rate target? Do you get pushback from athletes with that? And if so, kind of what is how do you help the athletes learn to get used to that and be confident in training and in relying more on their perceived effort?
Yeah, I'm explaining why it is such a massive tool to be able to listen to yourself and learn how does this feel and your perceived effort. And then slowly, like, also then together with them looking at your data, and it's like, how did that actually feel today? Or could you have gone harder, or did you go too hard? And then making sure that there are connections, and this teaching yourself to listen to your body is actually only going to make you a better athlete, that you will not only be fixated and on the data. And also often, if it is, as I explained just before, let's say you could not hit the target on the day, you will go home and you will feel so deflated because you did not achieve what you were supposed to achieve. But if you are not solely focusing on that number, you might actually come home and say, well, I did what I could on the day. I did not give up. I did not jump the fence at the lowest. I just did not have those watts in me today because I had a screaming kid all night, or my boss at work is an idiot, or, you know, there's so many other things that can factor why you could not hit the numbers on that day.
Yeah, that's good. And the other thing that you mentioned there earlier about finding a good balance between training and the rest of your life, do you have some common examples of things that you tend to maybe change when a new athlete perhaps starts working with you and you start to get to know them and you learn what their life is like? Are there any common denominators, things that quite often happen that you change in their training to account for finding that balance?
Often I sit down and ask them, of course, when can you train and when do you work and when can you swim, and are there days where you can't do this and this and this? And then really sit down and then say, okay, we need to be realistic here. I know you would like to train 20 hours if you could. And you might say to me, yeah, it is possible. But in reality, it probably isn't. Yeah, maybe for a few weeks. And then it will be too much. So it's about finding this realistic starting point that you are able to do day in and day out and week after week, so you're accumulating that load. Rather, better start a little bit less than a little bit too much, because then it's actually practical, doable, and then you would actually be able to be consistent instead of, like, as I said, after a few weeks it's not possible. So maybe scaling a little bit down and then see, okay, now they're actually able to hit the sessions and get the most out of each session, instead of it's going to be something like you do it with your left hand, or you can't really get it done probably, and then you have to cut here and there and there, instead of say, okay, I can only do one session this day, instead of like, yeah, I could maybe do two, I'll try. And then you only kind of do two halves, and then instead of, do you know what I mean? So it's about starting out at a realistic starting point, instead of most of us, we want to do so well and we have so many dreams and we will get there, but we just need to be patient.
Yeah, and as a fellow coach, I also recognize that when you have an athlete saying they can do 2 sessions on a given day, and you might prescribe 2 sessions to them because that's what they said they can do, and then in the end what happens is that maybe they only do one for several weeks, but that might not be the one that you as a coach would have prioritized if you had known that, okay, they're actually only going to be able to do one. So from that perspective as well, prioritization, it is important, or it is a good strategy to have a slightly more conservative target in how much you can do, because then it's easier to get the priorities right in that coach-athlete relationship.
Exactly, and then really getting the purpose of the sessions out, instead of like, that suddenly it's all like semi, gray, all of it.
Yeah. So switching gears a little bit, what do you think are things that are kind of similar, and also what are things that are different when it comes to pros versus amateur age group athletes? What are universal principles, and what are things that you cannot just assume that just because this is how it works for pros, it should work for amateurs?
I would say consistency is that's universal principle across all. It's about applying day after day, week after week, the load and the work, and then slowly you will become more fit and a better athlete. That is universal. Also, how do we reduce the amount of stressors that we have in our life? All the fluff that's around and all the things we need to do. Like as a professional, like it was all about keeping it simple in your everyday life, so that you didn't have too many balls up in the air and not too much on your plate, because you really needed to focus on, train, eat, sleep, repeat. Like it was literally just trying to make it simple. And of course you can't do it like that as an amateur, but you can still stress reduce and be mindful of all the things you are taking on, 1,000,005 things, maybe only 1,000,000 things, and then just cut back a little bit on the things that might not be necessary. Because taking on triathlon as a hobby, it takes up a lot of time. It really does. And there we just need to be aware that we have to say no to some things. We can't keep saying yes to everything we usually said yes to. And I think that is more women that maybe struggle to say no. because we would like to be able to do everything well. But yeah, reducing your stress is also universal. Then I think for the difference could be like for pros, I were, but pros in general, they are so good at simplicity. A session doesn't need to be super creative. It doesn't need to entertain you. It can be week after week where you're doing the same 10 by 2 minutes. They're really, really good at handling repetitions. It doesn't need to be, as I said, anything exciting, because they have this deep burning desire to succeed in their job, because that's what we live and breathe for. So I think that just handling that repetition and handling the simple training sessions are something that pros are exceptional at, where I feel often amateurs, they need a little bit more entertainment, like in terms of like the session they would like them to be a little bit more creative, so that they feel sometimes that also the times go by a little faster. There I feel a difference, but else there are so many transferables across. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And it's funny you should say that about maybe female athletes taking on, being more prone to taking on a bit more outside of triathlon and all the other things as well. I do have the same experience as a coach with the female athletes that I coach and have coached. That might well be a trend that exists.
Yeah.
So can we maybe break down what a typical training week might look like for an amateur athlete that you coach? And you can choose whichever profile you want, whether it's an intermediate or advanced or more beginner athlete. Just describe a little bit which type of athlete you're talking about, and then just a basic kind of structured training week.
Well, again, there is no one fits all. I don't think there is something that is super typical for my athletes. Again, I try to really figure out who am I working with and what's possible for the person. But there needs to be like a nice proportion between the workload, the easy work, and the rest. Really, that's kind of the overall principle. And then often it is in the weekend you have the bigger load. But again, it all depends on the person's situation. He might be working from home, and therefore he can train more in the week, and then he has a commitment to his wife in the weekend that there he spends time with her. So you can never really say this is typical, but if you want me to say something which I will not call it
example rather than typical.
An example, yeah. So often I would have, let's say we have a guy that's about 10-hour Ironman guy. Mm-hmm. He will be at this time of year, which we are now in March. He will be riding 3 times a week, so 2 weekdays, and a longer ride in the weekend, and in the middle of the week, there will be like a shorter, harder efforts, and in the weekend there will be more longer efforts, and then there will be like a just a ride, like a basic ride, just some foundation work as well. For the running, it will be similar. We would have about 3, maybe 4 sessions a week, where in the week days there will be like a session with some intensity. At the moment it can be hills, or it can be some shorter fartlek stuff to kind of get the leg speed starting, and also the neuromuscular stimuli of running faster and moving faster. And then in the weekend we will have some more longer build stuff, but still keeping it relatively steady and in control, nothing crazy just yet. And then the rest is sprinkled with easy running, not long runs, but just some easy running. For the swim, usually that is where many can't cope with much more than 2 times a week, because it takes a long time to get to and from the pool. And at the moment, due to COVID, a lot of pools are closed. But else, 2, I like 3 times a week, but 2 times is fine. And then those 2 times there will be no fluff in the pool. There will be usually a kind of a big main session, so that the time spent in the pool, they are super efficient and get some work done. and I use a lot of strength work in the pool. So that will be paddle work, band and paddles and pool boy work, so that you are strong, because you need to be strong in open water. Focusing on high cadence and front of body catch, and then doing some endurance work where you have not a lot of rest, so that you get familiar with the, swimming long durations in races. And then as we get closer to races, we will start to incorporate running off the bike too. But at the moment, very few are running off the bike. It's often too big of a stress on the body and not necessary just yet.
Mm. Yeah, that's a great example. And when you mentioned there the longer efforts on the weekend, would those be, but that are not too hard, would that be kind of target Ironman pace, or maybe a little faster, or is that roughly the sort of pace we're talking about?
At the moment, yeah, we are staying like just around like even like just doing like a 90-minute basic long run, or 70 or an hour 40-minute long run, just getting out there and getting, training that fatigue resistance. So like being familiar to run tired and carrying yourself with a nice strong form while you are getting tired due to the load and the impact on the body. And then for the people that are really strong runners already, you could sprinkle in like 2 by 15 minutes steady, or let them build the session throughout, so progressive throughout the whole run. So like finish stronger towards the end, but all like how, it's all about how do you feel out there. And right now I try not to put like pace targets on, but it's more a feel of what can you do on the day, so that it's more like a strong run.
Yeah. And when you mentioned the harder, shorter ride during the week with some efforts, would that be just a couple of minutes, or 5 minutes, or 10 minutes? What sort of efforts are we talking about? Are they like more like VO2 max or threshold, or?
Yeah, so at the moment I'm doing a lot of like strength riding, so a lot of overgearing, so heavy gears, low cadence work. Those are brilliant to build up specific strength on the bike that can carry on to being strong for longer efforts. And then also those strength efforts I do, and then I also do 30 seconds, a minute, fast, full sprint, and then with 1 or 2 minutes easy in between. So it's really like power production, neuromuscular, very short VO2 max efforts as well. They're brilliant at the moment, and maybe up to like 2 minutes of work at the moment, and they will get longer and more race specific.
All right, perfect. Is some sort of testing important for you? Like, do you do any field tests or even lab tests for athletes that have the ability to do that? What's your view on that?
Yeah, so I do, as I said in the beginning, I'm a very field-based coach, but I do have people do FTP tests, so like that functional threshold power test, either on the trainer or out if they have a piece of road where they do not have lights or cars and stuff, so they can get it done. And it's more to give like an indication of, okay, where are we at the moment? How does this look? And then I might do it again in a couple of months, so that it's not going to be a big deal when they say FTP, when they see that in their session. They shouldn't be afraid or feel pressure or get nervous. It's just a part of the training to kind of give us an indication, okay, where are we? I will also sometimes have like best average swim. So it could be like 10 by 100 with 15 seconds rest, best average. So just swim as hard as you can across the 10. And that's again, a nice baseline test. Where are we at the moment? And then we build from there. And those, of course, these numbers, then you can also make some target intervals. But again, you always need to be mindful of the field effort, the perceived field effort. I would say like, I think the pros can more use the labs, the test in the labs, but and for amateurs sometimes it can be quite overwhelming, and it can be quite, and also for pros, artificial situation where it's like you underperform and you're there with a mask, and it's not, you you do never gonna have a situation like that in racing. Sometimes it's like you can't really use the numbers for a lot if you're not really used to doing these tests. So I would say the best indicator of where we are races. That is real life. That's where we need to be good at. And one thing is to be good at doing an FTP test or a lab test. Another thing is to do a great triathlon. It's just a completely another world, like triathlon, putting three things together with some transitions and nutrition and some psychology on top of it. It's just another animal.
Yeah.
So I think that racing or any sort of, like, if there are small local races, just jump into them, get experience, and they will give us so great an indication of where are we. And if you are using devices to measure all the things during the race, we have so much to evaluate on afterwards. And there's so many things. Oh, I did that wrong. I should do that better, and write it down, and we'll do it different next time.
Yeah, that's a really great point, and it's something that it sounds like we're of the very same opinion that from races you can learn so much that you can't learn anywhere else. And I mean, just the example of the FTP test on the bike versus going out and doing a race, I just think that there's a big variability in what sort of power you can produce for, let's say, an Olympic distance race based on what you did in the swim. If you're absolutely going balls to the walls in that swim, then you're not going to be able to produce the same power as if you do like a hard but still somewhat controlled swim and pace yourself. But then again, depending on the race situation, as you know from your ITU racing backgrounds, there are definitely races where you maybe have to go all out on the swim, and then you just have to see what you have on the bike. But the point being there that just because you have a quote unquote FTP of whatever doesn't mean that you can say that, okay, so in the race I'm going to be able to do this many watts, because it just depends so much on the race dynamics. And then of course in the run, the swim and exactly. The bike will have impacted that. And yeah, I do think that probably a lot of amateurs are maybe afraid of racing a lot, when in reality, if they have the time and the motivation to do it, then racing more would probably be beneficial. Because even if, well, for one thing, you're building fitness, it's a great fitness building tool to some extent. But the more important thing perhaps is that every single race you learn something, and it will make you better for the next time.
Absolutely, yeah. I think if you are also after a race, go home and write down what did go well and what didn't go well, and then learn from that. I always wrote down, I always evaluated my races, because often you can't remember until the next one what it was that you did not do well, or if you believe that you should have trained a little differently, or that session you did that Wednesday, maybe you should have scaled that back, and then you would have been able to race maybe better. I was coaching myself the last 3 years of my career with my husband on the side. And there I really had to be, objective on seeing, okay, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? And can we do anything better? And I think then the races really gave us a great indication of, we are on the right track. We're doing things right. And then, as you also said with the races, how it can be a fitness booster. If you, are tapering a bit or resting a little bit into the race, and then also respect the stress that race was on the body, then you can get a huge fitness booster if you're just resting a little bit after the race again, and not get carried away. And then Monday morning you are out doing intervals again. Just let that race settle and adapt, and then you will bounce back stronger. So races are amazing. And then also don't be afraid of going really, really hard. Don't be afraid of just taking some chances out there when you're racing. You might surprise yourself. And when it is that you surprise yourself, it builds your confidence to the next one. And then suddenly you're there doing even more, because last time you did not break, and you could race harder than you thought you could. There's nothing better than when your body is showing up and you can do more than you think you can. Yeah,
and that's where knowing how to listen to your body and knowing how to race and train by feel comes in as well. Like if you have one of those days and you end up doing a really hard effort, but you feel that, okay, I should be able to manage this for the rest of the race, but then you look down at your watch and you're running 10 seconds per kilometer faster than you think that you can, then unless you have the confidence in yourself that no, I can actually do this effort, I know that this is an effort that I can sustain, then you might back off and not have that breakthrough day, so to say.
Exactly. Yeah, actually for me, in terms of like the watch, like it was not before getting up to like a long distance Ironman that I used a watch on the run. I've coming from short distance ITU racing where you go as hard as, possibly tasting blood, I'm going to puke kind of feeling in the body. So that I just carry that on to the half distance, that I just really just believed in myself, and I knew how hard I could run. I knew the feeling of running. I knew I could keep going for 21 kilometers and then feeling it incredible hard. So I never had a watch on, and I often could say when I passed the finish line, I think I've run this fast, and now I was so close all the time and guessing my time.
Yeah.
So that's obviously doesn't come overnight. That's years and years and years and years of teaching yourself, how does this feel?
Yeah. And one thing you mentioned there with the tapering and resting after the race leads me to something that I wanted to ask about. When you're in the preparation phase, like now in March, and many in the Northern Hemisphere, we're still maybe a few months out from racing. Do you work typically in a structure of having all the weeks be kind of a similar training load, or do you work on a kind of 3 weeks of higher load, 1 week of lower load, or anything like that? How do you view that sort of recovery structure?
Yeah, so I incorporate recovery in every week. So I like to have a day, at least one day a week, where it's either a full rest day or legs off. Legs off meaning like, only a swim day, so that you can recover from the running and riding, which is the most tasking on the body, especially the running. So I have that every single week, and it's probably the one where you do, I like to, if possible, having Monday as a very easy day. Then you do 2 or 3 days where it's significant harder. Then you do one day easier, a little bit easier again, and then the weekend hard, more or less. So like it's 1, 2, 1, 3, something like that.
Yeah.
I think that is, and then depending on the person, depending on the feedback, I will probably after 5 weeks or 6, depending on who the person is, have like a week of easier load. So just like an easier week, not like you're not training, but just an easier week where we have no hard intervals at all. It could also just be 3 days of that, again, depending on who you are. But then to just let everything settle. So especially here at the beginning or now where there are no races, then it's good to kind of break it up like that. Whereas like in race season, often there will be a race after 6 weeks or whatever, that you are tapering for a little bit and you are resting for a little bit. So it will be like a natural way of kind of bringing down your training ever so slightly. Let that block of work settle. Let your body adapt and get stronger before you build that next layer on it.
Yeah. All right. Perfect. If we discuss a little bit around each discipline, perhaps if you can just give 1 or 2 pieces of advice for athletes to improve each of the 3 disciplines. So with swimming, what would some key pointers be for age groupers to improve their swimming?
I think for swimming, it's learn to be comfortable about being uncomfortable. I think there are a lot of age groupers that do not swim hard enough. It might sound really hard to say it like that, but I think that it comes way easier for many to ride and run hard. So doing the ride and run, bike and run intervals is not a problem, but doing intervals in the pool where you're really uncomfortable is more difficult to get in. You often find yourself swimming in a comfortable pace or in the same pace, and that then you often hear people saying, I only have one pace in the swim. If it's a half Ironman or an Ironman, it's the same. And that is because you are not pushing yourself hard enough in the pool. So I think there can be too much fluff in the swim sessions, where it's like, too much kicking or too much drills. And if you're only swimming twice a week of an hour or 50 minutes twice a week, you need to make sure that the time you spend in the pool is efficient and you get some work done. And you have the biggest chunk of the session is the main session where the meat and potatoes is in. If you would never have a bike session where you ride 80% of the ride with one leg, like you would do in a swim session where you would be doing drill for 80% of the session. You will not become a fast open water swimmer by doing 80% drill. Of course, drills are important. Swimming is a technical discipline, but at the same time, you also need to be fit in the water. So I think it's something to embrace that and accept that swimming is hard. And even for me, coming as a competitor elite swimmer, I swam really, really hard as a triathlete. If I did not do that, I just couldn't be front pack swimmer. It just required that I still kept it up. And I think sessions, when you asked for that, something like some threshold short rest endurance sessions. So it could be like 30 by 100, where you have very short rest, where you're lying in about some sort of like race pace effort, and you just keep going. You go in, you check the time, take out again, and you get that feeling of this is how it feels to do a 70.3 swim or an Ironman swim. This is how I feel out there, but I can keep going. You get familiar with the pain. I did leading into Kona 18, where I was one of the first out of the water. I did replicating the same swim session every single Friday for 10 weeks. And I had the easiest, in quote marks, swims in Kona and the fastest swim I could have dreamt about. And that was just because I was so familiar with, going hard, really, really hard in the pool, that I knew I have done this so many times, I can keep going. And I think that's really undervalued, how important that is, that confidence hard swimming gives you in racing.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And as a bit of a side note, but with your background in competitive swimming, do you feel that, obviously, with the volume that you're swimming as a swimmer, it makes sense that a lot more of it is what you might call fluff. But at the same time, do you feel that there's too much fluff, and maybe it would like drills and all sorts of things, and that maybe either just having more rest perhaps, or replacing it with actual swimming, like basically incorporating technique work in the full stroke, would make sense? Because sometimes I'm not a swimmer, so I might be completely off base here, but sometimes I feel that all the drill sets and all of that, it has its purpose, don't get me wrong, but also sometimes that purpose seems to be a lot for entertainment, and people are going through the motions in the pool and not necessarily benefiting so much from it. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, they do have a significant amount of hours in the pool, so they do have way more time. And I also think it also depends on if it's the younger swimmers or the swimmers that are getting a little bit older, and also then knowing why are they actually swimming, that they literally have goals. They're not just there because their best friends is also there swimming, right? There you need to be entertained in a higher degree than if you really have a deep down desire for achieving something great. But you also need to remember that the small 1/10 of a what is it called, like a 1/10 of a second, for instance, matters in swimming.
Yeah, okay,
yeah. Whereas in triathlon, it doesn't matter. There's so many things that can matter in open water. People can swim on top of you, the waves, the current, pulling your wetsuit down, goggles off, or you get a bad start due to something, or there's so many elements out there you need to cope with. Whereas in a pool environment, a swimming environment, you have your lane. There is nothing you would not predict that would happen. No one would get into your lane. It's always the same situation. So you can train for these tiny things in the swim, which you can't in triathlon, where that's about being strong and fit and resilient and aggressive and assertive in water. It's not so much if you turn your hand 2 mil to the right. It doesn't matter, because that hand is obvious. Probably there will be another person that'll be on top of your hand, so you won't even catch that water. So the open water swim as a triathlete is just so different, and you just need to be confident and strong to have a good swim. And that requires that you swim hard in the water in training.
Do you have any other specific tips for the open water element of swimming other than getting fit and strong and resilient?
Yeah, working on relatively high cadence, again, being aware that you don't have a lot of space when you're swimming in a race. There's so many people around you. So if you have a fast stroke, then if you are losing one stroke because someone else took your water, then it doesn't cost that much if you had like long gliding fine strokes. I was actually one with long gliding distance to stroke kind of swimmer as a swimmer. But coming into triathlon, that was absolutely not doable. There was not space to have this beautiful stroke. I needed to incorporate fast turnover, much more aggressive turnover. And then other than that, focus on your cat, so the front end of your stroke, so that is really the most important part of the stroke, because often you might even get to the back end of your stroke because, again, there can be other people that's taking your water there. And then another thing is when you're siding, try not to lift your head too much because that will make your hip and your leg sink a little bit, and it will give you more resistance. You would drag your body a little bit more through the water. So if you can just kind of just get your eyes over the water, that's enough. And you do not breathe when you are siding. You're only siding. You just breathe through the side again when it is that you swim normally. I think those three things would be my key takeaways in the open water.
Yeah, perfect. And then what about biking? A couple of key tips for that.
I think that intervals towards the end of a longer ride is something that is really, really key to improve your bike strength and your abilities in a race. It's like training under fatigue. Again, it's training the fatigue resistance. So when we are racing, we are also under fatigue. When we have been, especially an Ironman, if you have been lying out there for 5 hours on the bike, you are starting to get tired. And if you are training to be able to have a strong back end of your race, that means that when it is that you have intervals, wait with the intervals towards the end of your ride, so that you're actually carrying a bit more fatigue into that those intervals. That would, of course, not all the intervals. There's some intervals where the target is to hit super high numbers, like to go as fast as you can and produce as much power as possible. But many of our sessions are these long sustained effort. It could be 3x20, 3x30 minutes, or building the last hour strong or something like that, which is just super key for having a strong back end of your race. And again, then you will be, when you train those sort of sessions, you will be familiar with that feeling you have in those sessions. When you get to racing, you can keep going because you know this feeling. You can back yourself, and I back yourself and think, I've done this so many times and I get through it. Yeah, I might feel dizzy and nauseous and I don't know what, but I can get through it. I've been here, I've done it. And I think that confident booster, again, is just invaluable for a race.
Yeah, I think that's an absolutely fantastic tip, and definitely something that I also prescribe a lot. One of the favorite sessions that I prescribe to my athletes is just kind of for a long weekend ride, let's say 3.5 hours. It would be 2 hours, 45 minutes steady, kind of mid to high zone 2, and then 30 minutes of tempo zone 3, or maybe close to 7.3 race pace. Even when you get close to the race itself, it might be up to race pace, but usually it's a bit under race pace, but still 30 minutes of just solid zone 3 work, and then a 50-minute warm down. And to do that after 2 hours, 45 minutes of good mid to high zone 2 work is a completely different thing than doing it in the middle of a 1 hour ride during the week or something like that. And as you say, Absolutely. It is really, really good for the specificity of triathlon to be able to do that. Yeah,
exactly. They are the bread and butter of triathlon. Doing those intervals late in the session is it's tough, but it's also super satisfying when you get through it. And I also think often that you would not be able to go overboard, because you are training with fatigue. You are tired at that point, so that you often don't overreach because you simply can't. There is no more in the tank. And there we're also staying again in the safe zone of not overdoing it and then becoming inconsistent in training.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And then the run. What would be some piece of advice for improving your run?
I think trying to vary your terrain and vary the surfaces you run on. See if you can get off the road and into the gravel or in the forest or on the treadmill or the track, which is also softer. Anything that will have a soft surface, because it is pounding the pavement. It is tough on the body. The impacts, running is just simply the hardest thing, and it is something that can get us injured if we don't respect those things. And I would also say the older you get, the more you should probably be aware of running on some softer surface. It doesn't mean that you become a slower runner when you get older, not at all. You're just maybe a little bit more sensitive because your joints and your bones and your ligaments are not as young as they were, and they don't recover as fast as they did. So vary the terrain, even if it means that you need to drive to the spot sometimes, because we might think it's nice that you can run from home, and it is amazing you can, but sometimes you just need to drive for it, simply to get on a soft surface. And then also change in between a couple of shoes, so that you don't run in the same pair of shoes all the time. Again, so that you protect your body and are supported in different ways. And in terms of run sessions to improve your running, I think it's similar with the biking, where build runs, or where you, within a longer run, you incorporate like a longer steady piece, or building towards race pace over a longer period of time, so that you train yourself to run with a tired body. How do you hold a nice form? How do you not, how do you still activate your glutes, that power center, when you're running, when you're tired? But you need to train that feeling, so that you're not only running intervals as the first thing straight after the warm-up.
Perfect. And finally, we talked a lot about racing already, but in terms of racing execution, is there anything there that you want to share in terms of tactics or strategy or mental focus points, anything that can help athletes race better?
Yeah, I think you always get these, doubts, and you're nervous leading into a race, which is good. Like, you should be worried, nervous, because that's because you care, right? If you don't care, then you might not get nervous at all. So the nerves are good. The butterflies are good, but try and rest in your preparation and look back at your training sessions. That I always encourage people, as I say, to evaluate also their training and write down some notes after every session, so that you can go back, and then you get so much confidence in seeing what you've actually done in your preparation, and that you can rest in, okay, I'm ready, and I'm actually so ready that I'm so soon to get on this start line. And getting to the start line ready and healthy and happy is a big part of the puzzle. To get to the start line and get ready is just sometimes difficult. So rest in that, and be grateful that you are going to get out today and shine, or tomorrow, whenever that race is, because that's what we train for. Most of us is going out racing. And then I think when you are in the race, it's about staying in the process, and staying within each portion of the race, and not let yourself get carried away. So try and, be in the swim when you are in the swim. How do you get to this buoy the best way? Or and then do everything you can in the moment. Because if you do everything you can as the best way you can only be satisfied when you cross that finish line. Even though that it was maybe not the position or the time that you dreamt about before the race started. But if you can ask yourself, did I do everything I could? And you can say yes, then you might start by getting disappointed, but after that you will be satisfied, because that was what the body had on the day. As we started by talking about, like, the date for this race, that was not something that you decided, and sometimes the body just doesn't show up. But if you can stay in the moment and do the best you can in each part of the race, then you can only be satisfied. So I think that's a great one. And that's also, to when you're out there and it can be a long day, to kind of keep going back to yourself and checking in. Okay, am I doing the best I can do right now?
Yeah. I think anybody who's done triathlon for a couple of years or more have had races where we did not feel that we gave our best or managed to get the best out of ourselves, or we failed to stay in the moment, and those are, at the end of the day, a lot more disappointing than the races when you do give your best, but even if you don't maybe achieve the position or the time that you wanted to. But I think those are also the learning experiences that at least for me personally, I know that the feeling after a race when I feel that, well, I didn't really give my best, that's the most horrible feeling in the sport of triathlon. And once you have had a couple of those, then you really don't want to have that again. And you can use that in future races to encourage you to stay in the moment, no matter how things go. Even if you have a crappy swim, you keep giving your 100% on the bike, because you just don't want to experience that feeling again of not doing your best and not trying to do the best you can with the moment you're in.
Absolutely, yeah. And I've had also a situation in a race where I didn't race as I wanted to, certain instances of the race, and you just sit with that empty feeling afterwards, like, why didn't I do this, and why did I do that? And so, and as you said, like when you have tried it, you're like, I'm not gonna do this again. Absolutely not. That was a terrible feeling I had afterwards. Whereas, like, if you give what you can along the way, it's just you're just satisfied in a different way, even though you might not have achieved what you started out dreaming about.
Yeah. I want to ask one more thing about from your own career as an athlete, and that's, well, a two-part question. First, what are some things you think you did really well and that listeners can learn from what you did well in your professional career?
I think doing the small things right every day. So in terms of body maintenance, so I spend a time before and after each sessions, like foam rolling and using the stick and using a massage ball under my feet. So kind of investing some time in loosening the body up after it's been out training and working for me. Then I would actually, spoil it a bit of whatever you would call it, just some self-massage and self-maintenance like that, which would help me recover and bounce back so much faster and be able to back up every single day. So I think spending these 5 minutes before and after each session, I think that's a huge plus. It was a huge plus for me.
Yeah. And are there some mistakes that you did that you now wish you would have done differently?
I'll say when I was coming back from injuries, I think running too fast too soon was something I did wrong quite a few times. Running fast for me comes easy. That might sound arrogant, but I am a natural runner, and I often struggle to actually run slow or run easy runs. I often just ran too fast. And it was only towards the end of my career I really learned how important it is to be able to run slow if you want to run fast and if you want to be a consistent runner without getting run injured. So running too fast too soon after injuries was something I would have liked to have learned a bit earlier than I did. Sometimes you need to make your own mistakes before you understand what it means. And sometimes you need to make the same mistakes many times before you really understand. And I would say that's one of them. I actually ended by, if I really couldn't understand that message for myself, I would either go on the treadmill, put the pace on the treadmill. So I made sure that I did not touch it, even though that I felt that I could run with a closed mouth. Or I would have my husband riding next to me and literally pulling me back and tell me, no faster than this. So that would be a thing that I would try and change.
Yeah. All right. Perfect. Finally, let's finish off with the rapid fire questions. So take just one sentence to answer these. And the first one is, what's your favorite book, blog, or resource related to endurance sports?
So at the moment, I'm reading a book called Advanced Sports Nutrition with Dan Benaport. That book. And then my own autobiography is coming out in English in a couple of months.
All right. Well, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Great. Is there a working title for that, or?
In Pursuit of Victory.
All right.
So I wrote it in Danish. It came out this summer in Denmark, my autobiography. And now we are self-publishing it in English. It is just gone into print, so it will be able to be shipped out worldwide. So I'm excited for it to come out.
Yeah, cool. And what's your favorite piece of gear or equipment?
It's my stick, so to self-massage, so self-body maintenance, and my treadmill.
And finally, what's a personal habit that's helped you achieve success?
My daily routine and the structure, the framework I had, and then not being a fanatic with anything, allowing balance in my life so that I could keep doing it all the time.
Perfect. And finally, where can listeners find you on the internet and on social media?
Mostly on Instagram. I'm Helle Tri on Instagram, and the same on Facebook. And then I have my homepage, which is hellefrederiksen.com. And then I am building a training platform and a content learning platform, which is called Our Collective. That would also be ourcollective.com.
Is that already launched and available, or is it a work in progress?
Yeah, it will be in about 6 weeks. We will launch the app where there will be personal training and targeted content, e-learning, and then human support layer in this app. In about 6 weeks, we will have it out for beta testing. So that's super exciting. Can't wait for that to become a reality. That's been a long time going.
Yeah, and that's probably more like, 3 weeks from the time that this interview is published. So
yeah, probably mid-April, we will probably have it out.
We'll try to have all the links to that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Helle. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Helle. It's been a couple of weeks since I conducted this interview by the time of recording this intro and outro, but I want to highlight a few things that I, from memory, still to this day stood out and resonated a lot with me from the chat with Helle. And those were, first of all, being able to train on feel and how important that is. Totally agree. The advice on race execution was brilliant, and I think that's something that a lot of us maybe miss in our eagerness to train perfectly, but then we kind of forget about, well, what about the race itself? The swim training advice and minimal fluff, especially for us time-crunched amateurs, was also really, really great, and basically just get right to it. You maybe don't need to do all of those drills that swimmers do. And finally, doing intervals when tired. And this is something that I don't think have come up too much in the past on the podcast, maybe in some example weeks that I've described as part of Q&A episodes or things like that, but not specifically or like directly addressing doing intervals or doing hard work when tired. And but it is a principle that I really, really agree with and use a lot in my coaching. And I think the longer the race you're training for, the more important this is to see what is your capacity once you've already done 3 hours of endurance on the bike, for example. What does your tempo power feel like when you already have that amount of energy used up earlier in the workout? So that is a crucial point, I think, especially for long distance triathletes, and or also if you're a road cyclist or anything like that where the races are longer, a marathon runner, I think the same thing applies there. As always, you can find the show notes for this episode on scientifictriathlon.com. And I'll also link to a related episode, because Helle used to be coached by Joel Filial in her ITU days and when first making the transition to long course triathlon. And Joel Filial was a guest back in episode 172. It is to this day one of my favorite interviews on the podcast, so check that one out if you have any interest in it. It is really, really brilliant. There will be another episode as usual on Thursday on an to-date, undetermined topic. And next Monday, I interview Kelly McNulty, who is a researcher behind 2 recent meta-analyses investigating the impact on exercise performance of 1, menstrual cycle phase, and 2, use of hormonal contraceptives. And then giving a lot of practical advice around that. So if you're a female athlete or a coach of female athletes, then that's definitely one to listen to. If you want to take your triathlon training to the next level, then I highly recommend that you check out our coaching services or training plans on scientifictriathlon.com. We would be really glad to help you out with making your training the best it can possibly be. Big thanks finally to our sponsors, Precision Hydration, that you can find on precisionhydration.com. Go and get a free hydration plan and get 15% off your order of electrolyte products with the promo code ThatTriathlonShow15. And thank you to Roka, that you can find on roka.com. Check out their wetsuits, tri-suits, swimskins, goggles, high-performance eyewear, and prescription glasses and sunglasses, and get 20% off your order with the promo code that you can get on roka.com/TTS. Thank you, as always, for listening. Keep training smart and keep loving triathlon.